Welcome to Tree Talks, Talks with the Tree Whisperer. Your host, Kevin Lee from KRL Tree Service, brings a lifetime of tree work experience and a solid foundation in botany to every episode. Welcome and enjoy.
Good morning, tree lovers. It's Kevin Lee, the Tree Whisperer in Calgary, continuing with my Tree Talks. This is episode number 8. I spoke in 7 of doing 3 sort of sum-ups of the botany section, leaves, stem, roots. I've been reviewing the material and my notes, and it looks like we dealt with that pretty deeply. What I'm going to do is try and combine a summary of those 3 major organs and their parts and their function and their interactions into just one sum up. Hopefully that will just reduce the number of episodes, and we'll be able to move on to the what I'll call the more hands-on section, what I'm going to call how to grow, which includes everything from the idea that you might feel a need for another tree on your property, or you have a new property and you need 8 trees or something like that. The idea of where to plant, site selection, plant selection, these things are all very, very important. Pick the wrong tree, a huge tree in the wrong place, grows into your neighbors. Well, bad things happen when there's not a little bit of forethought and planning go into planting. 40, 50 years go by, and you got a big problem, big tree in a place where it's just not working, rubbing on somebody's house or whatever's going on. So anyways, a lot of that can be avoided with just a bit of forethought. So that's just the first aspect of planting. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about that. We will get into that, as I said, in this next major section of talks that I'm going to call How to Grow. And we will do all of the hands-on stuff. So planting, pruning, fertilizing, watering, maintenance. We'll do some discussion on repairs. What happens if a tree cracks? Can we repair that? Can we have that tree live for a long time afterwards? Will that work? May get into some theory about trunk integrity, gauging the safety of your trees, looking for signs of decay and problems inside, discoloration in the bark, loss and sloughing off of bark, looking at things that might end up being a hazard tree. How would you deal with that? Those are all, and there will be others, but those are all subjects about what I call how to grow. So this was my plan from the start, was to do a section of botany talks. We've pretty well come to the end of that. As I said, just some summary now. And at that point, I will get into how to grow. And there will probably be 8, 9, 10, who knows? And I do plan to carry on. If something strange happens during the year, we have an insect, a new one, or a high population invasion, let's say, or our drought returns, or any of these kinds of things, I may be posting and keeping up with that. So thank you very much for tuning in and listening to all these sessions. I appreciate your patience. The first subject, as I was going to say, 8, 9, and 10, I think we'll try and do them here, is leaves. One of the 3 essential elements of your tree. Can't live without them. If a tree is defoliated by a leaf-destroying insect or severe hailstorm, even super high winds can strip the leaves off of trees. If that was repeated, the tree will not die from the first removal of its full set of leaves. But if you kept the leaves off for a year, most trees would be in pretty big trouble in the next year. So let's just say if that happened, we've now got into a situation where we had no energy input into the tree's body for a whole year. What's going to happen at this point is that the tree is going to have to spend all of its stored or much of its stored energy. This is starch converted to sugar that's stored in living axial and radial parenchyma inside roots and stems and branches. And as that amount of storage energy drops below a critical level, the tree could no longer have enough energy to run its own base costs, its own metabolic costs. And at that point, the tree would go into decline and die soon after. So the leaves are a absolutely essential organ. They supply all of the energy. It's a three partner system. And the three partners all have to be up and working well and functioning for the tree to thrive. When we do too much pruning, take a lot of leaves off, if we have a lot of storm damage, if there's physical impacts that injure the trunk, if we do a lot of excavation in the name of a brand new landscaping project, and we do a lot of root damage, all of these things have huge, major, and permanent impact on the ongoing life and life expectancy of the tree. Okay, so leaves come from buds. Buds are generally grown in the previous growing season, certainly terminal buds. As a shoot extends, it grows new buds during the active year. Most of the time, those buds will need some time to develop. It's not just a very simple thing that happens quickly. The development of the bud, the little juvenile leaves and the little juvenile growing point in there, which would be the shoot apical meristem, all of that has to develop over a period of time. It just can't happen quickly. And so the bud is quite a major project on its own scale and is developing as ongoing life. Shoot extensions and sugar retention is happening as the growing season begins. So leaves come from buds, and typically it's buds that were grown in the previous last year's growing season. Inside each bud are the little juvenile leaves, and as soon as the signal is given, those leaves, the bud cap, it's protected. It has a winter coat. It doesn't need that in the spring. The first thing that happens in initiation is the shedding of the bud coat. And at that point, the little juvenile leaves are in the light and they're tied into the whole vascular system of the tree, and they begin to grow quite quickly. They're expensive to the greater tree system at this time. They're not mature and photosynthetically, active, and so they are a sink. They are costing the tree. The investment is good. It's worth the tree's time and energy to do that, because within about a month, 3 or 4 weeks, something like that, the leaves are going to be mature and they are now going to be producing a tremendous amount more sugar than their development cost. Okay, so that just takes us back to the basics. We have leaves. What is their major function? What is the main thing that we want the tree has leaves for? They are the only tissue, except for a little bit of gain from the cortex that I described. They are the only tissue that gains sugar for the tree. It is the only energy receiver, the energy producer and source for the entire body and life of the tree. Not only are sugars produced for the metabolic ongoing cost of life, every living cell every second needs sugar, oxygen, and water. So there's always that base underlying cost. We're hoping to produce a whole lot more sugar than we need for our base metabolism so that we can store all this in living parenchyma, axial and radial parenchyma, in all branches, large subtrunks, trunks, and major roots. And that is there for emergencies, for a continual cost of energy throughout the winter with no gain. So you better go into winter with a nice fat savings account. In a sense, a tree is got this wonderful ancient yearly life cycle, and people that work outside, for example, farmers or arborists or all sorts of different outside workers, go through the same process. Winter ends. You have weather where it's good to work in. You work hard all season and into the oncoming next winter. Hopefully, you've saved some money and you can get through the next winter. And it's just a very ancient and good pattern. So, yeah. All right. So, from buds, and what do they do? Leaves are, like most things in nature, are very optimally designed to fulfill their function. And typically they're not heavy. You can hold up thousands and thousands of them and not really have that much strain. There is a lot of strain sometimes if they get snowed on, a lot of weight from the snow, or if there's really high winds, there's a lot of drag and pull from that. And we also can break branches with snow and lots of wind loading. So the leaf, in a sense, is like being in full sail at sea, whereas a bare tree in the winter is rarely broken in the wind or rarely broken with snow. So the leaves that's sort of one of the downsides, but we have to have surface area to catch a lot of sunlight. And inside we have all of those green cells, those chloroplasts, and they are producing sugar. Optimal temperature for photosynthesis is about 25 degrees Celsius. If we get up into the mid 30s, by that point, things are going to drop off. It will be too hot. The process doesn't work that well. The amount of evaporation through the open stomata in the leaf surfaces, especially the bottom surface, will be tremendous. The tree will say, hey, that's enough for today. Let's shut down for the worst part of this heat. And perhaps if there's still some light in the evening, and summer days are like that, we can still have some photosynthetic activity, reopen the stomata, allow the carbon dioxide gas back into the spongy mesophyll of the inner tissues inside the leaf, where the CO2 can be in contact with the chloroplasts, be absorbed. That's the carbon capture. Now we apply the photons of sunshine. That's the energy, and the process of photosynthesis is ongoing. And it happens right down to about 3 degrees Celsius. Pretty cool day, just above freezing. And so that's one of the tremendous advantages that evergreens have. Conifers, spruce trees, carrying their needles sometimes for many, many years. Any day in the winter where the snow is not covering and inhibiting the process, sun hits the needles, photosynthesis occurs, and a little bit of energy is gained in a situation, weather situation, winter obviously, where there is not a lot of photosynthetic activity, more of a steady payout of energy rather than a gain. So, yeah. Let's start at the top of a broadleaf at its surface and move through to the lower surface. So we have the cuticle. This is a waxy coating on the outside of the leaf that is in place to inhibit dehydration. And it works very, very well at that. When we think about water loss from leaves, and that is a very serious expense and problem for trees, constantly having to regenerate that, renew that, draw more water up from the soil, we can lose about 5% through the cuticle and about 95% through the stomata. So the cuticle is a very, very efficient barrier to evaporation. Below the cuticle is the actual first physical surface of the leaf. And the leaf blade on a broadleaf tree, an angiosperm, typically is covered with what we call pavement cells. And these are just the large flat cells that, parenchyma again, that are the surface of the leaf. One of their major roles is as a boundary. Again, the cuticle is applied to the pavement cells, and it's where there's an organ called trichomes. That's another word for leaf hairs, or any structure that forms on the leaf surface. For example, lots of leaf hairs are that's all they do is coat the leaf surface, and they help quite seriously with the amount lowering evaporation. So another type of trichome is let's think about a plant called stinging nettle, which is not something you want to run your hand over when you're walking in the bush around here. These leaves are covered with a trichome that has little wee balloons, let's say, tiny little wee balls of a poisonous toxic substance, and this will give you that irritation and burn. That's a trichome that does that. So anyways, so we have the cuticle, we have the pavement cells, and then as we move into the actual functioning parts of the leaf, we now have what is called the palisade parenchyma. That word means long vertical columns. And it's just a structure that helps with the efficiency and working of the leaf. These are also can be chloroplasts containing lots of chlorophyll, which will be photosynthetically active cells. Okay, so below the palisade parenchyma, we move into the mesophyll. This is the middle tissue of the leaf, and it is a little bit spongy. It's the cells are not packed so tightly together, and there is actually air spaces in there. On the bottom of the leaf, and I'm not going to jump and finish the discussion with that right now, but I brought up the idea of spongy and air spaces. And yes, the atmosphere is entering into the physical structure of the leaf from the stomata on the bottom surface mostly, and allowing carbon to be in close contact and to be able to be absorbed by the chloroplasts so photosynthesis can occur. So that's a little bit of a sort of more of a free-form area inside the leaf, a little less formal structure. It's all about water vapor moving and oxygen, the gases of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and whatever else, nitrogen, there's lots of stuff in there, being allowed into the actual body of the leaf. So as we keep proceeding down towards the bottom surface of the leaf, again, we will run into a section of palisade parenchyma, and then we will run into the pavement cells of the bottom surface, and again, it's cuticles. So one of the most interesting structures is the stomata. Stomata are the water gatekeepers. They are the first response as drought conditions get high during the day. The afternoon sun is really drying the tree out. Perhaps it hasn't rained, or that tree hasn't had any water for a long time, 3 weeks maybe. And the roots are trying very hard to absorb the last of the moisture that they can from the soil, draw that up into the xylem of the roots, of the stem, of the trunk, and into the branches, the twigs, and up into each leaf. And so when things get to a critical layer, the first mechanism that's used to preserve internal water is the closing of the stomata. Once the stomata are closed, they will not allow the hot air into the inside of the tree. The evaporation of water vapor will virtually stop, and the tree will just sit, get through the worst part of the heat of the day, and as I mentioned, open up in the evening. If the drought condition gets severe and we just can't get enough water, the first thing that's going to happen is those leaves will lose their turgor pressure. They will not stand up and have the proper look that they need. This is because they need to be like that to face the sun directly, and they do follow the sun. So the thing about that is that first we will see wilt, and if we are in a severe drought, those leaves will actually die. They will dry right up, and at some point we will have lost some branches from the top, and as the drought continues, we can lose more and more and more tissue from the top down. Why? Because that is the farthest place from the water source, which is the water that is in the soil that the roots absorb. So the stomata are amazing in their ability to just get the tree through the worst part of the afternoon. Hopefully it doesn't get as dry as I just described. So, yeah. There are a number of different kinds of leaves. We have a sun leaf, and this is a leaf on the outer edge of the crown. And it typically is in full light most of the day on any sunny day, of course, and doesn't have any problems at all getting enough light. Its problems would be getting enough water. So those leaves tend to have a little bit thicker layer of pavement cells. All of those cells of the parenchyma, chloroplasts, palisade parenchyma, pavement cells, mesophyll, all of these are very translucent. Light goes through them very easily. So the light has to penetrate through the entire structure of the leaf blade so that all of the chloroplasts within the leaf can get some photons and be photosynthetically active. Sun leaves typically do have a little bit thicker structure on their pavement cells, just because of the full intensity. In opposition to shade leaves, we have a lot of leaves on the inside of the crown, which we call shade leaves. They tend to be a little bit larger in size, and they tend to have a thinner pavement layer of cells so that the light that does get in there is useful and can get into the chloroplasts as well as possible. So, yeah. Conifer needles, they are a little bit of a different story. And the thing about conifers is that their leaves the needles are very small compared to the individual leaves of a broadleaf tree. They are there in their uncounted thousands, that's for sure, and they do make up for that. But the most amazing thing about evergreens, of course, is that they are always in leaf and can be for decades. There are pine trees that have needles that live for sometimes as much as 40 years. But the beauty of needles is that they are incredibly water efficient. They have a very thick, sort of doubled up cuticle structure. The wax is very thick. The stomata are indented in that, and there of course has to be gas exchange or photosynthesis wouldn't occur. But between their small size and their very heavy duty structure and their extra deep waxy cuticle, evergreens are incredibly efficient in drought conditions. My estimate, I have never read anything about that. That's just not information that's easy to find or readily available. But my own estimate of that is that conifers are probably about 4 or 5 times more efficient with water than a broadleaf tree is. So that's just a little bit about the advantages, that evergreens have over broadleaves with their needles and their thick cuticle. Yeah. We're just about done talking about leaves. What I want to talk about now is as the leaf ages through the season and we get close to fall and winter is coming and we know what's going to happen. The leaves are, those type of leaves as opposed to the needles of evergreens are not going to be able to withstand the deep freezing temperatures and they will die. A lot of native trees, wherever we go in the Northern Hemisphere, keep an eye on temperature and daylight length, and they know what's going to happen. And a lot of the native plants will actually start their autumnal sinensis is the correct word for that. And what that means is the fall breakdown and recycling and then failure of the leaves. So that whole process is pretty amazing. What happens is the chlorophyll starts to disintegrate and we see other pigments, the reds, yellows, and oranges of Carotenes and anthocyanins are a couple of the other pigments, primarily responsible for those yellows, oranges, and reds. During that time, any extra energy, proteins, anything that can be used in the leaf as much as possible is downloaded back into the greater tree system. As the sinensis continues, what will happen is a natural process called abscission occurs. And what happens with that is that the leaf is set up to be removed without injuring the twig. If a leaf is just torn off, we can injure the bark tissue of the twig. And this, of course, any invasion into the body is a welcome sight for bacteria and, of course, for fungus that sometimes are hoping to prey on the tree. So, first, what happens is a little area of small corky cells develops between the base of the petiole and the what we're going to have is the bud scar, twig scar there, leaf scar, excuse me, on the twig. And once those are gone, you can look at those. If you look at freshly twigs that have freshly shed their leaves through abscission, you can still see the little holes where the major veins in the leaf connected back into the whole vascular system of the tree. So anyways, little corky layers developed. The leaf continues to fail. And finally, the wind will just remove it without tearing. It's a beautiful system. So trees shed lots of parts. They shed their flowers, they shed their fruit, they shed the leaves, they shed twigs at most of the time at branch collars. We'll get into all that when we start talking about anatomy from a pruning perspective. So thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to a new episode soon. Thank you very much.